The first time my daughter called another woman mom while I was standing right there, I told myself I must have misheard her. We were in the kitchen. The late afternoon sun was slanting through the blinds, striping the counter in pale gold. I was rinsing rice in the sink, the water cold on my hands, when I heard it. "Mom, do you know where my blue sweater is?" I turned around with a smile already forming on my face, ready to answer. But my daughter wasn't looking at me. She was looking at my sister. For a second, no one moved. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed. My sister paused, her hand still on the coffee mug, then laughed lightly, too lightly. "She means you," she said, waving her hand toward me. "She's just confused." My daughter's face flushed. I didn't mean." I smiled, because that's what mothers do when something inside them cracks, but they don't want the sound to scare their children. "It's fine," I said. "Really." But it wasn't fine. Not then. Not later, and definitely not in the months that followed, when that single word, Mom, began to feel like something I was slowly losing. Before all of this, my life was ordinary. Not perfect, not storybook, just steady, the kind of life you build one careful day at a time. I'd been married to Daniel for 16 years. We met young, married young, and learned adulthood together, through bills and broken appliances, through job changes and miscarriages, and the quiet miracle of finally having our 2 kids. Daniel wasn't a poet or a grand romantic, but he was reliable. He showed up, he fixed things, he believed in routine the way some people believe in prayer. Our house wasn't big, but it was ours. A 2-story place with creaky steps and a back porch that needed repainting every other summer. The kitchen always smelled faintly of toffee and whatever spices I'd used the night before. The walls were crowded with family photos, school pictures, vacation snapshots, the kids' artwork taped up with mismatched bits of tape. It was a home that had grown with us. My sister, Lydia, used to visit often before she moved in. She's 3 years younger than me, always has been, sharper with words, quicker to smile, quicker to cry. Growing up, people said she had the softer heart and I had the stronger spine. She'd fall hard for people. I'd clean up the mess afterward. Lydia married young too, but her marriage was nothing like mine. Her husband, now ex-husband, was charming in public and cruel in private. We all knew it, if no one said it outright. When she finally called me late one night, voice shaking, saying she was leaving him, I didn't hesitate. I said, "Come here, stay with us until you figure things out." I meant it, at the time. She arrived with 2 suitcases and eyes swollen from crying. I hugged her in the doorway, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo and feeling the old instinct rise up, the need to protect, to shelter. "We'll make it work," I told her. "You're safe here." Daniel nodded beside me. He said, "As long as you need." That was the beginning. At first, it felt almost comforting having Lydia around. She helped with dinner, she folded laundry without being asked, she sat with the kids at the table, listening to their school stories with a softness I sometimes lacked after a long day. "You're such a good mom," she'd tell me, usually when Daniel was in the room. "I don't know how you do it all." I took those words like a balm, not realizing how often she said them or how carefully she chose her moments. Slowly, the house adjusted to her presence, her shoes by the door, her coat on the rack, her voice joining ours at the dinner table. I told myself it was temporary, just until she got back on her feet. But weeks turned into months, and things began to shift in ways I couldn't quite name. Daniel started asking Lydia's opinion on things he used to ask me about: what to make for dinner, which contractor to call, how to handle the kids' schedules. It wasn't dramatic, just small turns of his head, small questions tossed her way. "Lydia, what do you think?" he'd say. She'd answer thoughtfully, kindly, always kindly. The kids started gravitating toward her too. She had more patience for their endless questions, more energy for games. I'd come home tired, my head buzzing from work, and find her on the floor with them, laughing. "Your aunt's the fun one," my son joked. I laughed too, because that's what you do when something makes you uncomfortable, but you don't want to seem ungrateful. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being territorial. that trauma had made Lydia fragile, and this was just her healing. But there were moments, quiet, almost invisible moments, that lingered with me. The way Daniel's tone softened when he spoke to her, the way Lydia corrected me in front of the kids, gently but firmly, the way my daughter started confiding in her instead of me, and then there was that word again, Mom. It slipped out once more a week later, then again after that. Each time, Lydia brushed it off with a laugh. Each time, my chest tightened a little more. I never confronted her. I never sat Daniel down and said, "Something feels wrong," because I didn't have proof, and because part of me was afraid of what I'd find if I looked too closely. So I kept cooking dinner, kept packing lunches, kept smiling through the small, creeping feeling that my place in my own home was changing. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning, that my sister hadn't just come to stay, she had come to replace me.
There's a particular kind of loneliness that can exist even when your house is full. I didn't recognize it at first. I just felt displaced, like a chair that had been nudged a few inches out of place. Still in the room, still useful, but no longer central. Mornings used to be mine. I'd wake before everyone else, pad down the stairs in my socks, start the coffee. That quiet hour belonged to me. The hum of the machine, the soft glow of the kitchen light, my thoughts slowly waking up with the day. Then, Lydia started waking early too. She'd already be at the table when I came down, scrolling on her phone, coffee poured just the way Daniel liked it. "Oh, I didn't know if you were up yet," she'd say brightly. "I hope that's okay." Of course it was okay. I told myself that every time. But it felt strange watching Daniel kiss her cheek in thanks before leaving for work, something he rarely did with me anymore. Not out of unkindness, just habit fading into routine. Little things. Always little things. She reorganized the pantry one afternoon while I was at work. When I couldn't find my spices, she smiled apologetically. "I thought it might make cooking easier," she said. "You always seem so tired." I was tired, that was true. Tired enough not to argue. Tired enough to let her take over tasks I'd once claimed without thinking. The kids' schedules changed too. Lydia volunteered to pick them up from school to help out. She started attending parent meetings with Daniel when I couldn't get off work. "She's family," Daniel said when I hesitated. "It's good for the kids to see support." Support. That word began to follow me everywhere. One evening, I came home later than usual. Work had run long, my head ached, and all I wanted was a quiet dinner. As I stepped into the house, I heard laughter. Daniel's laugh, deep and unguarded, the kind I hadn't heard directed at me in a while. I paused in the hallway. They were in the living room. Lydia sat on the couch, knees tucked under her, holding a bowl of popcorn. Daniel leaned back in his chair, relaxed. The kids sprawled between them, a movie playing softly. "You should have seen her face," Lydia was saying. "I told the teacher she was being too hard on him." Daniel chuckled. "Good. He needs someone to stand up for him." I stood there, keys still in my hand, invisible. When Lydia noticed me, she jumped up. "Oh, you're home. We saved you some popcorn." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Thanks." Later that night, after the kids were in bed, I brought it up gently. "I didn't know you went to the school today," I said to Daniel as we washed dishes side by side. He shrugged. "Lydia handled it. You were busy." "I would have liked to know," I said. He frowned, not angry, just confused. "Why? It's not a big deal." That was the first time I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the sense that my feelings were becoming inconvenient. From then on, I started noticing patterns. Lydia positioned herself between Daniel and me on the couch. She spoke for me in conversations, finishing my sentences. She praised Daniel constantly, loudly, while gently critiquing me in private. "You've been so stressed lately," she'd say. "The kids can feel that, you know." One afternoon, my daughter came home upset. I reached for her, ready to listen, but she pulled away. Aunt Lydia already talked to me. She understands. That night, I cried quietly in the bathroom with the fan running so no one would hear. I told myself I was being jealous, petty, ungrateful. After all, Lydia had lost her marriage, her home, her sense of self. Wasn't it natural she'd cling to what felt safe? But then came the moment I could no longer ignore. It was a Sunday, I remember, because Sundays were sacred to me. Slow breakfasts, laundry folding, the comfort of routine. I was planning a small family dinner, nothing fancy. When I went to set the table, I realized something was missing. My seat. My chair, the one I always sat in, closest to the window, had been moved to the end. Lydia sat in its place, chatting easily with Daniel. "Oh," she said when she noticed me staring, "I hope you don't mind. The light's better here." I opened my mouth, closed it again. Daniel didn't look up. Something in me went still. That night, I lay awake listening to the quiet rhythm of my husband's breathing. The house felt different. Not unsafe, just unfamiliar, like I was a guest in a place I'd built. The next day, I overheard Lydia on the phone in the backyard. I wasn't trying to listen. I was watering the plants, the hose hissing softly, when her voice carried. "I'm just saying," she said, low and serious, "they rely on me, especially the kids. She doesn't even notice." There was a pause. "No, I'm not trying to take anything," Lydia continued. "I just want what's best for them." I turned the water off slowly. My heart pounded, not with rage, but with something colder, recognition. For the first time, the thought formed clearly in my mind. She isn't just staying here. She's positioning herself. That evening, I watched her more closely. The way she touched Daniel's arm when she laughed. The way she corrected the kids when they spoke to me sharply, but let it slide when they did the same to her. I finally said something. "Lydia," I asked carefully, "how long do you think you'll be staying?" She looked at me with wide, wounded eyes. "Do you want me to leave?" "No," I said quickly, "I just meant—" "I thought you wanted me here," she said softly. Daniel glanced between us. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Lydia said, already standing. "I think I'll go to bed." She didn't speak to me the rest of the night. The silence felt intentional, punishing. And in that silence, my doubt grew louder. I didn't yet know how far she was willing to go, but I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't about healing anymore. This was about replacement. There's a point when suspicion stops being a whisper and starts demanding to be heard. For me, it happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind that looks harmless when you remember it later. The sky was pale and overcast. The kids were running late. Daniel couldn't find his keys. Lydia was already dressed, calm as ever, pouring orange juice like she had nowhere to be. "I'll take them to school," she offered, glancing at the clock. "You're already stressed." "I can do it," I said, reaching for my bag. She smiled, kind, patient, almost pitying. "It's okay. You've been doing so much." Daniel nodded. "Let her help." That was how it always went now. Decisions made around me, not with me. I watched from the doorway as they left together, Lydia ushering the kids into the car like she'd done it 100 times. The door closed, the engine started, and the house fell quiet. Too quiet. I stood there longer than I meant to, staring at the empty driveway. A thought flickered through my mind. If I disappeared tomorrow, how long would it take them to notice? I shook it off, made coffee, tried to focus on the day ahead. But something tugged at me, a restlessness I couldn't ignore. I found myself wandering into the living room, straightening cushions that didn't need straightening. On the coffee table lay Lydia's phone. She must have left it behind. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. The screen lit up. A message preview glowed across it, brief and unmistakable. "They're starting to listen to me more than her." My breath caught. I stared at the words as if they might rearrange themselves into something harmless if I waited long enough. They didn't. Another message followed. "Just be patient. You're doing great." I didn't touch the phone. I didn't open the message. I stepped back like it might burn me. There it was. Not proof of an affair, not money stolen or vows broken, but something just as devastating. Intent. I went upstairs and sat on the edge of my bed, hands shaking in my lap. My mind raced through memories, rearranging them under this new light. The early mornings, the school meetings, the way my children leaned into her laugh and pulled away from my questions. She wasn't just helping, she was replacing. When Lydia returned later that afternoon, I acted normal, or at least I tried. I cooked dinner, I asked about school, I laughed at the right moments. Inside, something was hardening. That night, after everyone went to bed, I confronted Daniel. "Do you think Lydia is trying to take my place?" I asked quietly. He looked startled. "What? No, why would you say that?" "Because the kids listen to her more than me. Because you ask her things you used to ask me." He rubbed his face. "You're reading too much into this. She's just good with them right now." "Good with you, too," I said before I could stop myself. His eyes narrowed. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Silence stretched between us. "You sound insecure, and that worries me." That word, insecure, landed like a slap. I turned away, swallowing the urge to argue. Arguing would only make me sound exactly like what he'd accused me of. From that night on, Lydia's behavior shifted, subtly, strategically. She stopped being openly warm with me and instead adopted a careful distance, polite but cool. She made sure others noticed. "I don't want to step on her toes," she'd say to Daniel when I was in earshot. "I know this is her home." Her humility was convincing, almost admirable. The kids started pulling away more. My daughter began asking Lydia for permission instead of me. My son corrected me once, repeating something Lydia had said earlier. "That's not how Aunt Lydia does it," he said matter-of-factly. Aunt Lydia. Daniel's mother visited one weekend. I overheard Lydia speaking softly to her in the kitchen. "She's just overwhelmed," she said, her voice heavy with concern. "I'm worried about the kids." I stepped into the doorway. "Worried about what?" Lydia jumped. "Oh, nothing bad, just motherhood is hard, you know?" Daniel's mother gave me a look I'd never seen before, measured, assessing. Something inside me cracked. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there listening to the house settle, my thoughts circling the same question over and over. How did this happen without anyone noticing? I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. I wrote things down, times, conversations, small incidents that, alone, meant nothing, but together formed a pattern too deliberate to ignore. Lydia controlled the narrative, always calm, always helpful, always just a little more present than I was allowed to be. And then came the moment I could no longer deny. It was late, everyone else was asleep. I'd come downstairs for water when I heard voices in the living room, low, intimate. I paused at the stairs. Daniel sat on the couch. Lydia sat beside him, close. "I just don't know what else to do," Daniel said quietly. "The kids are confused. She's been so distant." "She's under a lot of pressure," Lydia said softly. "But maybe the kids need stability more than anything right now." Daniel sighed. "I don't want to hurt anyone." "I know," Lydia said. Her hand rested on his arm. My heart pounded in my ears. "You're doing the best you can," she continued, "and so am I." I stepped back silently, my legs trembling. It wasn't an affair. It was something worse. She wasn't trying to steal my husband's body. She was trying to steal my life. And the scariest part? She was winning. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of my house, the ticking clock in the hallway, the refrigerator cycling on and off, Daniel's breathing beside me. Everything sounded the same, yet nothing felt familiar anymore. By morning, I understood something clearly for the first time. If I reacted with anger, I would lose. If I begged, I would lose faster. Whatever Lydia was doing, it depended on one thing: me looking unstable, unreasonable, emotional.
So I did the opposite. I became quiet, not distant, quiet in a way that looks like acceptance. I made breakfast like always. I packed lunches. I asked Lydia if she slept well. I smiled at Daniel. I kissed the kids' foreheads before school. And I started watching. Really watching. Lydia thrived on being needed. She positioned herself wherever there was uncertainty or tension. If the kids argued, she stepped in. If Daniel hesitated, she reassured him. If I disagreed, she softened it, later, privately, so I looked harsh by comparison. So I stopped disagreeing out loud. I let things play out. When the kids asked Lydia questions, I stayed silent. When Daniel asked her opinion, I nodded along. When Lydia apologized to me in that careful voice, "I hope I'm not overstepping," I reassured her. "It's fine," I said. "I appreciate you." Her eyes flickered when I said that, just for a moment. She wasn't expecting cooperation. Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered facts the way a person gathers breath underwater, quietly, deliberately, without drawing attention. I checked calendars, I replayed conversations, I noticed how often Lydia framed herself as the bridge between me and my family. "She didn't mean it like that," she'd say to Daniel. "She's just tired," she'd tell the kids. "She loves you, she just shows it differently," she'd explain to others. I realized then she wasn't attacking me directly, she was redefining me. And I understood something else too, something painful but necessary. Daniel wasn't blind, he wasn't stupid, he was tired. Tired of tension, tired of choosing sides. Lydia offered ease, I offered reality. So I stopped offering explanations. Instead, I created space for truth to reveal itself. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. It started with a call from the school nurse. My son had collapsed during gym class. Nothing dramatic at first, dizziness, shortness of breath, but enough to send him home early. I rushed to the school, heart pounding. Lydia was already there. "I came as soon as they called," she said, hand pressed to her chest. "I knew you'd be busy." Busy? At the hospital, she took charge immediately, talking to nurses, answering questions, comforting my son. Daniel arrived later, breathless, his eyes darting between us. The doctor ordered tests, blood work, monitoring. We waited. Hours passed. In that waiting room, something shifted. My daughter sat beside Lydia, holding her hand. Daniel paced near them, occasionally resting a hand on Lydia's shoulder. I sat alone, my purse clutched in my lap. I watched Lydia carefully. She spoke softly but firmly. She answered questions about my son's medical history, some correctly, some not. She made decisions without looking at me. When the nurse asked who would stay overnight if needed, Lydia said, "I will," without hesitation. I stood up. "No," I said calmly, "I will." The nurse looked between us. Daniel hesitated. Lydia smiled gently. "Of course, I just thought—" "I know what you thought," I said, still calm, "but I'm his mother." The word landed differently in that room. Lydia's smile faltered. The doctor returned with results. Stress-induced fainting, anxiety, nothing life-threatening, but not nothing either. As the doctor explained, Lydia interrupted. "He's been under a lot of pressure. There's been tension at home." I looked at her. "What kind of tension?" I asked. She blinked. "Just change." "Change caused by what?" I pressed. Daniel frowned. "Is this really the time?" "Yes," I said quietly, "it is." The doctor cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Emotional environments can affect children. Consistency is important." Lydia nodded eagerly. "Exactly." "And whose responsibility is that?" I asked, my voice steady. Silence. For the first time, I saw something flicker in Daniel's expression. Uncertainty. Not about me, about her. That night, while my son slept, I spoke to Daniel alone in the hallway. She answered medical questions she didn't know.
She volunteered to stay without asking me. She was helping, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Helping whom? I asked. He didn't answer. The next morning, Lydia arrived at the hospital early. She brought coffee, she brought snacks, she brought sympathy. But she also brought something else: control. I think it might be best if the kids stay with me for a few days, she suggested to Daniel, just until things settle. I turned to her slowly. Why? I asked. So they don't feel overwhelmed, she said smoothly. By me? I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. I didn't say that. I didn't have to, I replied. Daniel looked between us again. For the first time in weeks, he looked uncomfortable. I think the kids should come home with me. Lydia's voice sharpened slightly. Are you sure that's what's best? Something in her tone, just for a moment, slipped, and Daniel heard it. I think, he said slowly, that we all need to slow down. Lydia stared at Daniel. That was the crack. Not a collapse, not yet, but a crack, and cracks let light in.
Cracks don't shatter things all at once. They whisper first. When we brought my son home from the hospital, the house felt different again, but not in the way it had before. The air was heavier, watchful. Lydia moved through the rooms more carefully now, like someone aware the floorboards might creak beneath her. She still helped, still smiled, still offered advice, but something essential had shifted. Daniel noticed it too, though he didn't say it out loud. I could tell by the way his eyes followed Lydia now, not warmly, not gratefully, but with a kind of quiet calculation, like he was replaying moments in his head, stacking them against each other, searching for meaning. The kids were subdued. My son clung to me more than he had in months. My daughter hovered close, uncertain, as if unsure which version of our family would emerge next. And Lydia? Lydia grew urgent. She started insisting on routines she'd never cared about before. She corrected the kids more sharply. She spoke over me more often, but with a brittle edge that hadn't been there before. It was as if she sensed time slipping through her fingers. The turning point came on a Saturday afternoon at a family gathering I hadn't planned. Daniel's parents came over, along with his sister and her husband. Lydia suggested it. Family togetherness might help, she said sweetly, after everything. I agreed, not because I trusted her, but because I knew something she didn't. You can only manage a narrative so long before it collapses under its own weight. The house filled with familiar noise, laughter, clinking glasses, the smell of roasted chicken drifting from the kitchen. Lydia moved easily among everyone, touching arms, asking questions, presenting herself as the calm center of the storm. I stayed mostly quiet. I watched. At one point, Daniel's mother pulled Lydia aside. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw Lydia's posture shift, chin lifting, shoulders back, confidence returning. Later, during dinner, Lydia spoke. I've been meaning to say something, she began, voice soft but clear. I hope this doesn't come out wrong. The table fell quiet. I felt Daniel stiffen beside me. I just want what's best for the kids, Lydia continued, and lately it's been hard watching them struggle. My heart beat steadily. I didn't interrupt. They need stability, consistency. Sometimes that means hard conversations. Daniel's sister frowned. What kind of conversations? Lydia hesitated, just enough to seem reluctant. About who's really available for them. That's when I spoke. Lydia, I said calmly, what exactly are you suggesting? She turned toward me, eyes wide. I'm not suggesting anything. I just think the kids have bonded with me during this difficult time. That's true, Daniel's mother said gently. They do seem close to you. Yes, I agreed. They are. Everyone looked at me now. And that's because you stepped in when you thought I wasn't enough, I continued, my voice steady. You positioned yourself as the safer option. Lydia laughed lightly. That's not fair. Isn't it? I asked. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I reached into my bag and pulled out my notebook. I didn't want to do this publicly, but since you brought it here, I opened it. On March 12th, you told Daniel I was emotionally unavailable. On April 3rd, you told my daughter I didn't handle stress well. On April 19th, you told Daniel's mother you were worried about the kids being confused by my mood. The table was silent now. Lydia's smile froze. You tracked me? She asked sharply. I listened, I replied. There's a difference. Daniel looked at her. Did you say those things? She swallowed. I was concerned. And the message on your phone? The one where you said they were starting to listen to you more than me? Daniel's head snapped toward her. What message? Her face drained of color. You went through my phone? She demanded. I didn't have to. You left it on the table. Daniel stood slowly. Lydia, he said, his voice tight. Did you say that? Silence. I was trying to help, she said finally. Someone had to step up. I never stepped down, I said quietly. My daughter's eyes filled with tears. Aunt Lydia, why would you say Mom wasn't there for us? Lydia looked at her, panic flashing across her face. I didn't mean... You did, my son said softly. You told me Mom didn't notice things. Daniel exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. I think we've all been confused, and that confusion has been encouraged. Lydia's voice rose. So now I'm the villain after everything I've done? No, Daniel said. You're someone who crossed boundaries. She stood abruptly. I didn't come here to be attacked. No, I said. You came to be chosen. The words hung in the air. Lydia looked at me then, not with hurt, not with anger, but with something close to desperation. You already have everything. I just wanted something to belong to. I felt a flicker of pity, but pity doesn't undo damage. Daniel spoke again. I think it's time we set some clear limits. What does that mean? Lydia asked. It means, he said, you need to find another place to stay. The room went very still. Lydia stared at him. You can't mean that. I do, he said. For the kids, for my wife. She looked at me one last time, and for the first time, she didn't smile.
Lydia didn't leave that night. Not right away. She retreated upstairs, closing the door to the guest room with a quiet finality that echoed through the house. The family gathering dissolved shortly after. Chairs scraping softly against the floor, murmured goodbyes, a few awkward hugs. Daniel's mother squeezed my hand before she left. I'm sorry, she said, not just for the evening, for everything. When the house was quiet again, Daniel and I sat at the kitchen table long after the kids were asleep. The overhead light buzzed faintly. A glass of water sweated onto the wood between us. I should have seen it, he said finally. I should have protected you. I stared at my hands. I should have spoken sooner. We didn't argue about it. There was no use. We were past blame now, standing in the place where truth finally settles. Uncomfortable, necessary. The next morning, Lydia packed. She moved carefully, avoiding eye contact, folding clothes with a precision that felt deliberate. The kids hovered nearby, unsure. My daughter hugged her, briefly. My son stayed back. I love you, she said to them. You know that. They nodded. When she turned to me, there were words in her eyes she didn't say out loud. Apology, resentment, longing, all tangled together. I never meant to hurt you, she said quietly. I know, but intent doesn't erase impact. She nodded once,
Then she left. The door closed behind her with a soft click. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, but honest. The days after felt strange, like learning how to walk in a house where the furniture had been rearranged. The kids tested boundaries again, unsure which rules applied. Daniel hovered, overcorrecting, trying too hard. I let it happen. Healing isn't tidy. It's a series of small, awkward adjustments. One evening, my daughter came into the kitchen while I was washing dishes. She stood there quietly for a long moment. "Mom?" she said. "Yes?" "I'm sorry I called Aunt Lydia Mom." I turned off the water and dried my hands. "You don't need to be sorry." She frowned. "But it hurt you." "Yes," I said gently. "It did." She wrapped her arms around me then, tight and fierce. "I didn't know." "I know," I whispered into her hair. "You were just trying to feel safe." That night, I tucked both kids in myself. I stayed longer than usual, listening to their breathing even after their eyes closed. Daniel and I started talking again, not just about logistics, but about us, about how easy it had been to let someone else carry emotional weight neither of us wanted to carry alone, about how exhaustion can look like indifference if you don't name it. "I didn't choose her over you," he said one night, voice thick, "but I let her stand between us." I nodded. "And I let myself disappear because I didn't want to be difficult." We made a promise then, not a dramatic one, not a perfect one, but a real one. To speak sooner, to listen longer, to protect the space that belonged to us. Lydia called once, 2 weeks later. I let it go to voicemail. She texted instead. "I found a place. I hope you're all okay." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "I'm glad you're safe. I wish you well." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was peace. Over time, the house found its rhythm again. Morning coffee returned to quiet. The kids laughed more freely. Daniel and I rebuilt habits we hadn't realized we'd lost. Sometimes, when I folded laundry or stood alone in the kitchen at dusk, I thought about Lydia, about how easy it is to confuse closeness with belonging, about how desperation can masquerade as love. I didn't hate her, but I didn't invite her back either. Some boundaries exist not to punish, but to preserve. And I learned something else too, something I carry with me now like a quiet truth. You don't lose your place all at once. You give it away in pieces. Each time you stay silent when something hurts, each time you doubt your own worth in the face of someone else's confidence. I stopped doing that. This is my home. These are my children. This is my life, and I no longer shrink to keep anyone else comfortable inside it. Even now, when the house is quiet and everyone is asleep, I sometimes replay it all in my head. Not with anger anymore, not with fear, but with understanding. I understand now how easily love can turn into competition when someone feels they have nothing left. I understand how silence can look like consent, and how being nice can slowly erase you from your own life. And I understand that protecting your place doesn't make you selfish, it makes you responsible. For a long time, I blamed myself. I asked myself why I didn't speak sooner, why I didn't stop it earlier, why I allowed someone else to define me in my own home. But healing taught me this: you do the best you can with the clarity you have at the time, and when clarity comes, courage must follow. I didn't destroy my sister. I didn't humiliate her. I didn't take revenge. I simply told the truth, and I chose myself. My children learned who their mother really is. My husband learned what happens when you don't guard your marriage. And I learned that my voice matters most when it trembles. If you're listening to this and you feel like you're slowly disappearing in your own family, if someone has stepped into your space so quietly that no one noticed but you, please hear this. You are not imagining it, and you are not wrong for wanting your place back. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to fight loudly, it's to stand calmly and say, "This is mine." Now, I want to ask you something from the heart. Would you have spoken up sooner than I did, or would you have stayed quiet to keep the peace? Tell me in the comments. I read them all, and your stories matter here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. And if stories like this, real, emotional, honest, mean something to you, please support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support helps these voices be heard. Until next time.